make your whole body go crack. Let the baseline move, take it off of the map. We rock vibes every time we feel boom, boom, clap, yeah, we got it like that. Kick drum, make your whole body go crack. Let the baseline move, take it off of the map.
Yes, what's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Heatcheck. I am your host, Jaydee, and coming up on the show today, we react to the new players testing positive for COVID-19 and those opting out of the Disney bubble. How will this impact the conclusion of this season? Then the debate continues this week as we continue to build our all-time starting five. And this week, it's the position of the small forward. And all this is going to be helped to be broken down by the special guest I promised you. Oh yes, to give us the real insight as to what MJ was really like. So joining me on the show today, we have our usual suspects, the NBA analysts, Mo Moonsey and Ovie Soko. But gentlemen, join me in welcoming to the show for the very first time, excuse me, God out of Iowa, three-time NBA champion with the Chicago Bulls, co-host of one of the best basketball podcasts out there pushing through, and one of the elite agents in the game, my guy, BJ Armstrong. Welcome to the Heatcheck, my guy. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I like it. What an impressive intro. I don't know how I can ever live up to that, but it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you guys again for having me.
Look, we must thank you, man. I like giving people their flowers while they're still in our presence and all the rest of it. So I just want to turn around and say to you, thank you for your impact on the game. Thank you for the impact you've had in the previous as well. But your perspective is so interesting because you were in the homes of the world around looking at sort of your championship feat with Jordan between 91 and 93. And then the interesting thing about it is, of course, you went on to then become a rival against Michael Jordan. I just wanted to ask you, first of all, what do you think are the biggest differences between being his teammate and then competing against him?
Well, being his teammate is a lot easier because 9 times out of 10, you're going to win the game. But, in all seriousness, Michael was a phenomenal player, phenomenal competitor, and a student of the game. And he never cheated the game. He always acknowledged, the commitment and what was necessary to win the game. And I think watching The Last Dance and what he was able to do kind of gave everyone a glimpse, a peek behind the curtain, if you will, of his true greatness. And that was his willingness to always prepare, his willingness to never give up. But more importantly, he really made a commitment to the game, to his teammates, and being the very best player he could be, that he could become. And he certainly did it as well or better than anyone has ever, put on a pair of sneakers.
You talk about that sort of growth into becoming the best player in the world and the best player that he could possibly be. But I have to ask you, when you were his teammate during those periods, did you see a difference in his mentality as the intensity sort of increased?
Well, what I saw was you saw the growth of his game as he began to, he understood that he was a great player. He understood his impact to the game. But what I really saw was his growth of understanding how to win the game. And as great of an individual player he really was able to integrate his talent into the group and understanding that, my goal now as a player who's averaging 32, 33 points a game is not to just go out and score points. My game now, my role is to win the game. And he basically stopped playing basketball in that regard. And what I mean by that is he really took on the responsibility of how to win the game every time he stepped on the floor. And it was beautiful to watch, especially after we won our first championship, that he really was playing a different game. He was playing the game he learned how to manipulate the game. He learned how to really bend the rules of the game, understanding that he wasn't going to play just one-on-one basketball. He was playing 1 against 2, 1 against 3. In many cases, like you saw with the Detroit Pistons, they had the Pistons rule. He was playing, against a team, and he really just took on a different challenge as he was exploring, the rules and the game, the NBA game in and of itself.
BJ, I would be amiss, and my teammates would never forgive me if I never gave them the opportunity to ask questions as well, because these are real basketball heads. These guys love the game just as much as anybody in the world. So, Mo, I'm going to give you the chance opportunity to speak to BJ first. Is there any questions you would love to ask him, man?
I've got millions of questions. We could be here all day. We could film a million episodes of different questions I could ask. But,
Let's do it.
I'm down. But you're obviously a legendary Chicago Bull as a player, And then after you retired, you spent some time in the front office on that side of things as well. And then obviously, as Jaydee mentioned, the agency side of things as well. But when you look at the Chicago Bulls today, we discussed it on the show a few weeks ago. What do you see as their pathway to getting back to being a successful franchise? If you were in charge of the team right now, what would your steps be? Which players would you keep to build around, and what direction would you look to take?
Well, first and foremost, there are many directions, and there's no right or wrong way to build a team. But this team will always be, come down to really two essential ingredients. You need talented players, and they are in the group of teams, if you will, that are acquiring as much talent as they can. They have a great young player in Zach LaVine. They have great young talented players, marketing, but talent alone just won't win. You have to get an exceptional player that's going to give you an advantage. So I would continue on the path that they're going through, which is through the draft and trying to find a group that will mix. However that player will come, who knows whether it comes in a draft, whether it comes in free agency. Hopefully you'll, get a player and they'll develop from within. But again, it's going to take very talented players. And then you got to have probably the most important ingredient if you're going to have any sustainability is you have a team that's healthy. And, and that requires the mental toughness to go out there and play through injuries. And you need a little luck along the way. So, you're going to need talent. You're going to need the toughness. And, it always helps when those guys, don't sustain any type of significant injury that's going to keep them out of the lineup for any length of time. And, you'll take it from there. But I like what they're doing. And but they're going to have to get players that's going to get out there on the floor and continue to grow together because they are a young group.
Ovie?
BJ, yeah, I just want to take you back to, when you first stepped into the league. So, you're just leaving Iowa, standout player, you've obviously done what needed to be done to get to the highest level of basketball. At this point in time, I'm sure you're already very aware of who MJ was. The country was going crazy around him. What kind of pressure were you feeling sort of stepping into that environment? You knew you were stepping into an environment with a guy that, was a special caliber player.
Well, I would have loved to have told you as a young kid when I first came to the Bulls that I knew who Michael was. I really didn't. He wasn't Michael Jordan yet. People forget that, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were at the height of their careers. They were, without question, the dominant players of that era. We're talking about in the 80s when I first came into the league, in the late 80s when I came in. Magic Johnson alone went to the finals 8 times in that span, just in the 80s alone, and won 5 championships. Larry Bird won 3 championships. So those two players dominated that time. Michael Jordan hadn't won any championships when I first came there, but you knew and you saw his talent. But, the narrative back then was the following, could you actually build a team around a scoring 2 guard? That hadn't been done yet. And traditionally, the teams were always played with big players or bigger players like a Magic Johnson. In this case, we're talking about Larry Bird, but the center position was the most dominant position. So there were a lot of unknowns. There were a lot of uncertainty around whether it was possible to build around a player like that. And thinking about it now, you're going, what are we talking about? But back then, a player you hadn't built a team or a franchise around a player like a Michael Jordan. So I wasn't aware, but you saw that he had all of the essential elements of a team or a teammate that you could build a team around, but it hadn't been done yet. So, but luckily we stuck with it. The organization stuck with it. And within an 8-year period, he won 6 championships. So, he truly was an amazing player, but I don't think anyone saw that when I first got there to Chicago.
To piggyback,
BJ,
just to
Go on.
let me just piggyback on that. No. So
I told you we were going to be here all day.
Of course, no. So it was known he was a talented guy. The guy was scoring bunches of points. He was competing at a high level. When would you say, as a teammate, yourself or the organization started to realize, okay, this is a different kind of animal? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm sure you guys, as a collective inside the family of the team, would have realized, all right, this is a special player, and like you guys would have saw what was coming, maybe more so than your opponents or fans.
Well, that's a great question. And there are a lot of moments. I think you saw in The Last Dance, you saw glimpses. Michael had like 63 or something in the playoff series versus the
Mm.
Celtics. But for all of us that was there in that locker room, our moment of truth, if you will, I think came in the Eastern Conference Finals in 1990 when we actually lost in Game 7 to the Detroit Pistons. That to me was the most pivotal moment. And the reason being is because we had to make a choice on the following. Were we going to actually make a commitment as individuals to beat this team? The Detroit Pistons were a better team than we were, but we had better individual players. We had the best player on the floor, Michael Jordan, and we had this young player, Scottie Pippen, who could also create havoc, not only on the offensive end because he was able to break down the defense, but defensively, we knew he was very versatile and we could move him around the floor. And the thing that allowed us to, ascend to that level was really Scottie Pippen's development. Scottie Pippen suddenly became not just a young prospect, he became a perennial all-star, a top 50 player of all time. And then what we did was we put Scottie Pippen on Bill Laimbeer, which gave us a significant advantage because now we could take away one of their key things that they like to do, which play screen roll. We could switch the screen roll when they would do it with Bill Laimbeer because we were never concerned with him going to the post and them having a steady diet of just throwing the ball into Bill Laimbeer. That was the key. Scottie Pippen's growth. Michael Jordan was clearly the best player on the floor. And once we were able to figure that part of the game out, that played to our strengths, that gave us a significant advantage. And the Pistons really couldn't counter what we were doing because Scottie really exploded on the scene. And there was no counter that they had for him.
Well, BJ, thank you so much for that insight. But how we start the show every week is we catch the fans up with the updated news that's happening around the league. And gentlemen, just when we thought we had the concerns and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic managed, there's a latest turn in the developing story, of course. And we saw last week the Denver Nuggets center Nikola Jokic tested positive, but there were reports coming out of the league of 6 other players at this stage as well testing positives. Ovie, I want to get your perspective first. Looking at these new developments, do you feel like the league will then change their opinion or their new plans to conclude the season this year?
I think the NBA does a great job of constantly trying to keep up with what's going on and adjusting to the situation. Um, I don't think that they're going to make any huge changes as of right now. I think they're thinking about how they can adjust and work through the situation, and if it still makes sense after that. But I'm pretty sure that the NBA, they're working on solutions for what's going on and all the news that's sort of coming to us at the moment.
BJ, I have to ask you, with the players not having to return to training camp until the 9th of July, do you see the possibility of more players opting out before the return of the season on the 30th of July?
Well, I think more players here are going to take it into consideration. And this is a big step in many regards because health and safety shall remain, first or the top of the list as these players begin to return back. And many of these players have obligations and things they have to do, and everyone has to feel comfortable with their own health and safety when it comes to COVID-19. So, I don't think there's a particular right answer or wrong answer. I think every individual situation is going to have to examine that, make the best choice for them and their family, and move forward. But as like the rest of the population, you're going to see more and more cases begin to reveal themselves. You're starting to see it now, and I think all of the players will take that into consideration as they make their decisions moving forward.
Well, Mo, literally, BJ has just hit it right there in terms of individual decisions. I know you've been a big fan of Davis Bertans on this show this year. He's taken the individual decision to not put himself into the bubble because of his career high season this year. Do you agree with that decision? You've seen some responses from some of the NBA players. What's your take on it?
Rule number 1 in life, secure the bag, baby. You got to do what you got to do because he's had a fantastic season. He's established himself as one of the best three-point shooters in the league. Now, the concerns about playing in Orlando, aside from the COVID situation, is players have expressed their concerns about, the soft tissue injuries and little things they can pick up because they're not going to have an extended training camp. They're not going to be able to have that time to get their bodies ready. So, when you're a player like Bertans, who's had 2 ACL surgeries in the past, it is a big risk, especially when you consider the Washington Wizards have a 0.1% chance of even making the playoffs. They're just kind of there so that it's an even number of teams. So I have no problem with what Davis Bertans is in. He's chosen the best decision because you've got to think long term in this as well. You know, Evan Fournier can come out and criticize him and say whatever he wants. But if you're Bertans, you're trying to secure a contract for the next 4 or 5 years. If you come out here and get injured, that contract is going to be significantly lower if you have a third ACL tear than it would be, you know, given the body of work that you put out through the 65 games that you played. So I respect the decision, and I respect the decision of any player that wants to play or doesn't want to play for whatever their circumstances. Having said that, if Bertans was on a contending team, then it would be a completely different conversation. But given that the Wizards have no chance of winning, then I've got no problem with what he's doing.
I like that quote. Secure the bag. There's still a few days. There's still a few days left for these decisions to be finalised by all of the players, and I'm sure they'll all take their individual situations into consideration. But gentlemen, let's switch gears. It's time to introduce our guests to an opinionated section of the show. Let's do Hot or Not. So BJ, welcome. Look, this is the type of thing that as you see the clips that's online and all the rest of it, that grab a lot of the attention. But let me give you a quick overview as to how we do it in this section. There are no rules. As much as these two respect you, I promise you, BJ, they will not hold back if they disagree with anything that you are saying right now. So it's very, very simple. I'm going to bring up a few topics of discussions that have been happening around the league that have, let's say, differed opinions over the last few days. So when I bring a topic up, you have to make your own decision on it, whether or not you feel like it's a hot take and you agree and give your reasons behind it, or it's a cold take and you disagree. But of course, you still have to state your reasons behind it. You all good?
Okay. I'm all good. Let's go for it. Let's see how it is. Is anyone playing, or am I the only one playing? Am I the only one playing?
No, everyone. Trust me, BJ. You'll see.
We all playing. We all playing.
All right. Okay.
All right, gentlemen. Where is there a better place to start than the Western Conference leaders, the Lakers, and their guard, Avery Bradley, who has opted out of returning to the NBA season this year for his own personal reasons, citing his family. But hot take, and BJ, I will come to you first, since you're the newest member and our guest on the show here. I think Avery Bradley's presence won't be missed as much as projected, and the Lakers can still cope and win a championship without him this season.
Well, I disagree with that. I think Avery Bradley's presence, he has a significant presence because he's the only player on that team, in my opinion, that can defend those smaller, quick point guards. Defensively, I think that's where they're going to miss him the most because of what he brings on that end. He's a tough-nosed defender. He was beginning to shoot the ball well, and he's the only player that can defend those small little guards who can dart and do things a screen roll. So I think it's going to make it more difficult for them to win minus Avery Bradley. And I think I don't want to undervalue what he brings to the game. He's a tough player. I love what he brings. I think his mental toughness and defensively, especially what he's going to do on that end, I think will be really missed by the Lakers moving forward.
BJ, this is the part of the show where the opinions are going to differ. So I'm going to come to Ovie now, and I'm going to ask you exactly the same question. How do you feel about that hot take? And I also want you to take into consideration the potential inclusion of J.R. Smith.
Well, I'm in the middle on this one, but I'm gonna say hot take. I'm gonna say hot take. No, I'm gonna say that's a hot take. I think the Lakers can still win. Now, I think they do miss hugely, massively on the defensive end, and I don't think they're going to be able to find a replacement that's going to be able to bring what he does, what he brings on the defensive end. But at the same time, they still do have Danny Green. Can he defend the same caliber of players that Bradley can? I don't think so. But the Lakers have size. That's one of the things on the defensive end that I think they have, which is a huge advantage. They can go with a lineup where everyone's over 6'7", if they really wanted to. So on the defensive end, they have other lineups that they can go with that I think will cover up for where they lack maybe on the perimeter.
Mo, I'm going to come to you now. Same take. And this is before the other two decide, because as you can see, they've already split in terms of opinions. So this is before the other two get a chance to rebuttal to each other. What is your opinion on this? Do you genuinely believe Avery Bradley is going to be missed by the Lakers?
Naturally, he'll be missed, but I don't think he'll be missed enough for it to actually alter their chances. And there's 3 reasons why. The first reason, I know Laker fans around the world have been extremely frustrated with Rajon Rondo, but what you guys need to know is Rajon Rondo in the regular season and Rajon Rondo in the playoffs are 2 completely different animals. Playoff Rondo is a whole nother beast, and he'll be playing much better than he has all season long. The second reason, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, also with Clutch Sports. So he's been with LeBron. They had a scrimmage. Clutch Sports held a scrimmage last week for those players. So there's already a little bit of chemistry working up through there. And the third reason, and the one that I think is the most important, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Caruso. Alex Caruso is going to have, all jokes aside, because I know he's the subject of a lot of memes, he's going to have his chance to break out and shine. Because when you look at it, when you look at the Lakers team, when you dive into the numbers, because Ovie, you know how I do, I'm looking at those numbers. If you're looking at the per 36 minutes to kind of equal out Bradley's starting minutes and Caruso coming off the bench, Caruso actually averages a whole nother steal, and he averages more blocks than Bradley. He's got more defensive win shares. And out of all the players on the Lakers, the only player with a better on-off rating than Caruso is LeBron James. And 80% of Caruso's minutes have come without Bradley. So, you know, it's going to be a chance for the young fella to kind of make a name for himself outside of all the funny jokes that people tell on Twitter and Instagram when they try and make jokes about his hairline or whatever they're trying to do. But I really think that this is the chance for Alex Caruso to come out and shine and establish himself as a solid 3-and-D threat in the league.
BJ, how do you respond to both of those points? It's your time.
Well, I think here's the following. As I do, I like all of those players, 3 players, you know, Rondo and these players. But once you get to the playoffs, you know, it is a certain level and a different level of how you play. And, you know, I think as the game now has progressed to what you see offensively, right? It's a premium now on shooting, especially on the offensive end. But the most important thing, I think, is defensively is how you're going to be able to pressure the ball and extend your defense, you know, into, you know, maybe forcing them maybe into a 94-foot game. So I think missing Avery Bradley, because he was for them in many regards, he was the one who initiated them on the defensive end. So I think that will be missed deeply, especially as they advance in the playoffs and as you get against the other teams. You know, this team was built to compete against their neighbor, in a sense, literally the LA Clippers. And you're going to need that type of player who can play that grinded out game as you get into the playoffs. It's not going to be, you know, guys are just going to be out there shooting threes like they do in the regular season. You're going to have to grind out that game. Who's going to get those loose balls? Who's going to fight over the screens? That's, to me, is the difference of winning and losing. So as I respect all of these guys that you said, Rondo and Pope and Caruso. I think those guys are really good players. But what Avery Bradley brought to the game, he brings a level of toughness that I don't think you can really replace. And I think they're going to miss him as they advance. They have a lot of talent. I think they have size. They can block shots. They can run. And clearly they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But you're going to need those key role players in those key positions. And I think that will be the difference when you're talking about winning a championship.
Okay, I like that. The thing is, the interesting thing about it is all of these predictions are locked, like I say every week. Yeah, and we get a chance to look back on this when it comes around to October, if the Lakers manage to get that far. But guys, take a seat back for a second. Yeah, take a deep breath. I have some good news for you, and it's coming out of New York. Yes, I said New York, and I'm talking about the Knicks. I know. Let's just Knicks fans, stay with me for a second.
I don't even know if that makes sense. Good news that the Knicks
have actually hired William Weasley as the new executive vice president and senior advisor to help with basketball operations. BJ, hot take. Looking at the history of Weasley and the relationships that he has around the league, and also, I believe, in looking at the stroke of genius that this was by Leon Rose, could this lead the Knicks back to glory?
Well, let's take a hot take here. The one thing that I learned here about when you become an executive in the NBA is you got to build a team. And in the end, the executives aren't playing the game. You're going to need exceptional talent. You're going to need exceptional players, and having relationships with players, as that is great. You know, don't get me wrong. I think I've known Wes for 30-something years. Wes is terrific at what he does. But now you're talking about a different ball game. You're talking about building a franchise. You're talking about managing salaries, drafting, trading, so forth and so on. So all of those things will come down to the following. You got to put the right pieces in place when those players are ready to win. And that, to me, is a art and skill all into itself. And we'll see how this turns out. But you know what? I've known him. He certainly has been around the game. He certainly, as you alluded to, he has all of the relationships. But the fact remains, you have to build a team. You have to build an organization. You have to put all the pieces in place. And that's a tall task for anyone. And we'll see how this plays out.
Mo, I want to hear your take, because when you look at Wesley joining the front office and including that with Leon Rose and the general manager, Scott Perry, could you see the Knicks turning their fortunes around? Because let's just say the Knicks fans have been very, very patient over the last few decades.
Before I give this answer, I have to obviously point out that, unlike BJ, I don't actually know Wes like that. So everything that I'm saying is from what I've heard and what I've read. And I know a lot of the stories about him because he's become like a mythical figure around music, around sports and everything. So a lot of it is maybe a little bit exaggerated. But from what I do know and from what I have heard, is this could possibly be the best decision the Knicks have made in the past 20 years. Because Worldwide Wes, as he's known, I think everyone who's a fan of the NBA will have seen him without realizing who he was. He's the ultimate behind-the-scenes player in the world of sports. He once met Leandro Barbosa, took him for dinner, and he was trying to recruit him to come and play in the NBA. He pulled out his phone and he rang Jay-Z and Beyonce and had Barbosa singing down the phone. He rang Michael Jordan and said, "Here, talk to your childhood hero." So the power that he has in terms of being connected in sports is off the charts. He was an instrumental figure in getting LeBron to leave Goodwin Sports and sign with CAA in 2005, I believe it was. And he still maintains very close ties. So, obviously a lot of the relationships that he has with players, we're talking about the LeBron, the MJ, the Carmelo, Allen Iverson, and guys like that, they're obviously a little bit older. But one thing that I think Ovie should be worried about is that Devin Booker is a CAA client who still has 4 years left on his deal. And, when you're talking about having influential, because signing Wes to the Knicks now, what that does is it changes the culture of that New York management, because the Knicks are the most, let's be honest here, they're one of the most unattractive franchises to play for when you take out the factor of them being in a big market, because they haven't hit on a big free agent. Every summer, Knicks fans get gassed. Oh, we're going to get Kawhi. Oh, we're going to get KD. Oh, we're going to get they don't get any of them. You end up with Julius Randle. Cool, whatever. But now you've got a guy up there in New York who players have a relationship with and want to work with. Because if there's one thing that Worldwide Wes is good at, from everything that I've read and everything that I've heard, is building relationships with people.
I just want to say it's nothing personal against Julius Randle. I mean, that's a walking double-double.
I love Julius Randle, but he's not Kevin Durant.
That's fair enough. Ovie, everyone's talking about relationships, and the presence that Wes will bring in terms of those relationships. I just want to ask you.
I disagree. I'm just going to let you know off the bat. You don't have to finish. I disagree. I think when you talk about turning a program around, I think it's all about culture. You have to build a new culture. And when you're looking at the New York Knicks and the state that they've been in for a while now, they lack in a winning culture. So what that shows me is that bringing in someone that has great connections means, okay, you'll be able to get good players. That's wonderful. But if you bring a good player into a culture that's not about winning and that's not the primary objective in every single thing they do, now I feel like you end up with situations like Carmelo Anthony, just for an example. Not saying that he wasn't a terrific player, he puts up numbers, all of that good stuff. But now we're talking about trying to build something that a team that can hopefully contend in the East for a conference title and later on a championship. So, I think having the connections, just to piggyback on what BJ said, is great. And I think it's a step in the right direction. But I don't think that's what the Knicks necessarily need. This is a program that needs to literally be uprooted from the roots and They got to build from zero. They have to build from scratch.
So when you're building
But
from
Ovie,
scratch,
go
you're
for it.
bringing
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
players. If you're building from
bring
scratch,
yeah,
you've got to bring
but
in.
that's not
This is the guy that recruited D Rose to
yeah.
University of Memphis. This is the guy that brought John Wall to Kentucky. So if you're trying to uproot and start from scratch, who better to have on your side
You
than the guy who is
you
influential in this way of bringing players to where he thinks they'll fit best?
my thing is because the program doesn't have a winning culture at the moment. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can't
That'll
just
be
put a player
changed.
if you put one good player into a situation where the program isn't about winning and it's not a winning they don't have winning ways there. Especially if you're talking about a young player, I don't know how good that is for them. On top of that, they're in New York City, probably one of the most active cities on the planet. These things, it's a dangerous combination. So I see what you're saying, and I see how important it is to be able to get pieces, but you need pieces in the right system. You need good pieces in that would fit into a culture that's made for winning.
Yeah, and look, I think in the end, obviously having the relationships is one thing, which is definitely a component of it and a part of it. But the key for all of this is putting the right pieces in place. That's going to, as everyone is discussing here, is having a culture which affects the bottom line, which is winning basketball, a winning tradition. And more importantly, this is a franchise now that's continuing to try to find that right combination. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think we all can say that at least they've identified what is needed, which is they have to identify and get the players. And they have to identify and get the right talent here. And we'll see how this kind of plays itself out. So maybe 2 or 3 years from now, we can all come back to see, whether we were right or wrong in this situation.
I'll send you a
Oh,
Devin
don't we
Booker
love
Knicks
the
jersey for your birthday, Ovie.
This is exactly why we love the NBA, the constant dialogue, the constant conversations, and we do get the opportunity to see how this all plays out. But bringing it back to this year, there's one team that's causing a lot more questions than others. So let's discuss in Off the Court. I ask you a question. Is the East a foregone conclusion? Statistically, we've seen the Bucks have a historically good season, especially behind the reigning MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. But then, looking at the playoff basketball's history, we know that it poses a different type of question. And thinking about the questions that's been posed this year, top of that list is the Boston Celtics. And there was only one man that we could send to investigate a little bit deeper as to whether or not they can expand upon these expectations.
Let's talk about the Boston Celtics. Heading into last season, they were tipped to win the Eastern Conference with a star-studded team featuring Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford. But whilst the future looked bright, things were not quite as sunny in reality in Beantown. A few months into the season, tales of unhappiness and friction were leaking from the Celtics locker room. The young stars who took the Celtics to consecutive conference finals had seen their roles reduced with the return of Kyrie and Gordon. Irving was using interviews with the press to throw shade at teammates, the same ones he was supposed to be mentoring, and Hayward looked like a shell of his former self whilst on the court. The result was the Celtics crashing out of the playoffs to the Milwaukee Bucks, Al Horford signing with the 76ers, Kyrie opting to join Kevin Durant in Brooklyn, and things weren't looking too promising entering the 2019-2020 campaign. The media were predicting disaster. General manager Danny Ainge acted swiftly to replace Kyrie by sending Terry Rozier to the Charlotte Hornets in exchange for all-star Kemba Walker, but he made no other major signings or trades. This led many experts to write them off and question how the team would function without Al Horford down low, who had been such an integral part of their success in the past. Lack of media belief in the team was misplaced because fast forward to today, and the new-look Celtics have already booked their ticket to the playoffs. They've enjoyed a season which has included a 32-point blowout win over their rival LA Lakers and impressive wins over other title contenders such as the Bucks and the Clippers. The first and perhaps biggest factor in their success this season has been team chemistry. The current group of players seem to enjoy being around each other, and this has been reflected in their play on the court. The ball moves freely on offense, a stark contrast to last season's isolation-heavy style. The togetherness of the current squad has also reflected at the defensive end, where, despite losing Horford, the team has made a collective effort that has limited opponents to an average of only 106 points per game, the second lowest amount in the league. Kemba Walker joined the team and immediately became the leader that the squad needed to orchestrate Brad Stevens' offense. The ever-gritty Marcus Smart has set the tone defensively. Gordon Hayward continued his long return from injury by increasing his scoring while shooting a high percentage. But it's the re-emergence of the two Jays that has been the biggest difference. Jaylen Brown, who was called overrated and overpaid when he received a 4-year, $115 million contract extension at the start of the season, has broken out as an explosive force on both sides of the ball. Whilst locking down opponents defensively on the perimeter, he has also increased his scoring from 13 points a game to over 20. Jason Tatum, who was previously criticised for his shot selection, has developed an air of maturity in a season where he has reached heights that many did not expect. He played in his first All-Star game and since then has been on an unstoppable streak. With a confidence boost of being selected amongst the league's elite, he went on a streak averaging 34.5 points per game on 57% shooting, including 56% from downtown. At this point, it's undeniable that Tatum is only a few years away from being spoken about in the MVP conversation. Although Jaylen and Jason are stars in the making, the Celtics have found a winning formula by playing collectively. The roster has 5 players averaging double digits in scoring and 12 different guys all playing double-digit minutes. They even have the NBA's fan favourite Taco Fall getting standing ovations. Whilst the season might not have its conclusion yet, the future really does look bright in Boston. For real this time.
Mo Moonsey, incredible feature as always. It's always so interesting to hear your perspective on that dynamic balance. And what I took from it more than anything else was the balance that Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens have had to contend with over the last couple of seasons. I ask you, at this moment right here, do you feel like they found that correct balance?
I think that, everyone talks about this war chest of assets that Danny Ainge had with all the draft picks he got from the various trades he made. And obviously in an ideal world, I know they were targeting Anthony Davis, but I feel like because of the situations that have unfolded, the season where Kyrie was injured and Tatum and Brown and those guys went to the conference finals and played 7 games against LeBron, I feel like, they had to change course. And now having a squad here with a leader like Kemba, who's happy for the young guys to grow. And, Gordon, obviously they've had to adapt to him being injured and kind of losing a step with that. I feel like it's the perfect situation for these young guys to really develop their game and continue to be great.
BJ, we have a huge Celtic community here. Mo Moonsey at the front of it.
Yeah.
But I'll ask you straight. Are they sleepers for this year in terms of contending with the championship? That's what they all want to know. Can they really surprise all, especially in that unique bubble?
Well, certainly anything is possible. And these are very unusual circumstances that we're actually playing. We're talking about completing the season, but really, in many regards, this is a new season. And these teams and players, we don't know how they're going to respond. They have young, emerging talent. We're talking about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. These are 2 very athletic young men. And their games are on the up and coming. And I really like what they've done. In saying all of that, are they at the place of like where the Lakers or the Clippers, or even you're talking about Giannis? Giannis is an MVP player. He's clearly going to be the best or second best player on the floor every time he steps on the court. And he certainly has shown the ability to dominate a game. And when you talk about these Celtics, I like what they're doing. I think we hit upon it there in the feature. They're trying to find that delicate balance of chemistry. And just because you have players on the floor, sometimes they don't always get along or their games don't complement one another. They're still trying to figure it out. I think right now, Kemba Walker may be the best player on the team, but certainly they're hoping that Jason Tatum can take that mantle. They're certainly hoping that he will emerge as not only the best player, but the leader of the team if they're going to actually ascend or, accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, which is win a championship. He has shown flashes. I mean, look at his numbers in that one little stretch. I mean, those are MVP caliber numbers, but you're going to need to be able to sustain that for a length of time. And right now, that is to be, we're still waiting to see him do that in an extended amount of time, but certainly he's shown his flashes now. And now we're saying he could be that next great player, and we'll see how it turns out.
Ovie, how are you seeing them shape up? Because I asked you last week who was the best up-and-coming franchise. And to quote you, you said it was the Mavs. So I ask you, looking at the dynamic now that you see with the team in Boston, how are you feeling about that same question?
I think they have a good balance of talent, but I still feel like they're missing an inside presence. Whether that's going to come through a trade or whether that's going to come through the draft, I don't know. But I think, as these players are growing and as they continue to grow as a unit, they're still missing that fundamental piece that I think will be needed on any winning team, and that's an inside presence, more so for the defensive end, because they have perimeter offensive guys who have proven they can handle the load on that side of the ball. So, I definitely feel like they're headed in the right direction. The guys have done better than a lot of people expected, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that they've done so well where they're actually competing with, the Lakers, the Clippers, and Giannis and the Bucks.
Before Mo jumps at you, I see. I know. Let him go, because I know, I know that one hit his heart. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Like, I get it. Like, traditionally, NBA teams, basketball teams should have a big presence on the inside. But if you've got the second best defense in the league without having any of those big players, are you really missing it that much? Because look at the way the game is played nowadays. It's not like you're going to need a guy unless you're playing. There's two players in the league that you need to have a great inside presence for, and that's Embiid and Jokic, because no one else is really going to be in that post, banging down low and winning a game through playing in the post. And the Celtics have found a way to combat that, even when they have had to play those big guys. And they're the only team in the league that's had double-digit wins over the Bucks and the Lakers. So, I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on just how good they are, even without this elusive inside presence or whatever you want to call it, because the defense is still elite compared to every other team in the league.
I wouldn't say.
I mean, it could be.
Yeah, go on.
Go ahead.
Go on. Yeah, I wouldn't say.
Guys, you're both being so kind to each other. Yeah. This is twice you did it as well. DJ, you're our guest, so you go first. And
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No. I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say a presence on the inside so much on the offensive side of the ball, and in the sense that you need to necessarily stop big men. But it's just from deterring guys from like LeBron James, which you're never going to stop it, but you don't want him just having free reign to go to the basket. We all know that the playoffs is a very different.
They blew the Lakers by 40, though.
I know. But we all know the playoffs. Can you see them blowing out the Lakers by 40 in the playoffs?
To quote the great Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. Anything is possible.
Okay, there you go. And that's as far as it can go. Right? But yeah, so when you're talking about taking it to the next level, which is playoff basketball, you need an inside presence, especially on the defensive side. You need to be able to take away a lot of easy twos. If a team that does have a dominant big, like most of the guys that they will come up against, if they want to make a deep run in the playoffs, you're going to need someone that's going to be able to play on the inside on the other side of the ball.
Well, I will say this about their team and the Boston Celtics. There's one glaring thing that's missing from their group is rim protection at the basket, because you have so many wonderful players that will be able to attack the basket, especially in the playoffs. And the playoffs, let's just talk about the three teams we're talking about. LeBron James, Anthony Davis are going to attack the basket. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George are going to attack the basket. Giannis, no one can keep him from attacking the basket. And let's not forget players like Siakam and so forth and so on. So rim protection is one of the glaring things that I see that is missing. It's not to say that they can't play this new style, which they have. I mean, Marcus Smart is a defensive player of the year type of player, but you're going to need to protect the rim, because these athletes, especially these wing players who attack the basket, they are making an impact in the game. LeBron James and all of those players, Kawhi Leonard, they are going to make an impact, and you have to be able to counter that, especially in the playoffs, because it's all about making adjustments. Yes, you can catch a team in the regular season on a back-to-back or what have you, but once you're in the playoffs, you have to be able to rim protect, and you're going to have to be able to counter those players. And if that's one thing that I see that's missing from the Celtics, that is rim protection and being able to counter the verticality of the game. You have to have that vertical presence, because you need big bodies. You need the JaVale McGee's. You need the Dwight Howards. You need those players who can protect the rim if you're going to win. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks. They have the Lopez twins. They are some of the premier rim protectors in the league, just because of their big bodies and taking away all of those other players who are trying to slash and attack the rim. So I think that is something to consider as you begin to advance and start planning 7-game series.
Well, one thing I can say, gentlemen, is that I do agree with Mo in one instance. 100% the future does look bright in Boston. And Mo, I'm not going to lie to you, BJ's gave you an alley-oop for you to talk about Taco Fall there, which you missed, by the way. Yeah, but it's okay.
I didn't want us to talk over each other like it happened just now. Do you know what I'm saying? I was being a gentleman and letting things unfold.
I hear you. But
Taco
Ovie
time
and
is
Mo,
coming,
I think
though.
it's time. I think it's time we introduce our guest into the growing conversation on this show about the all-time starting five. Now, BJ, all I'm going to say to you is these gentlemen have been on their best behavior so far. Watch the difference, yeah? Let's do it. It's posted up. For all those that this is their first week watching the Heatcheck, I have to give you the disclaimer. This is the part of the show where we're building our all-time starting five. And you watch, every single NBA fan will have a different all-time starting five because it's all about your preference. And believe me, on this show, there have been some differing opinions. BJ, I've spoke to you beforehand and told you about the debates between LeBron and Magic at the point guard position and Kevin Garnett and Kevin Durant at the power forward position as well, between these two gentlemen. But before we get into their selection this week for the small forward, I have to come to you and ask you, can you give us your all-time starting five?
My all-time starting five. This is a lot of pressure. But yeah, here's my starting five. And I want to preface this by saying, here's my starting five in building a team, right? Not that I think these are the all-time greatest players at their position, but building a team. So first, you got to have Kareem in the middle. You can see him right behind me here. That's my guy. Guy scores 38,000 points. I got to have him in the middle, okay? My power forward position is Tim Duncan, without question, because of his versatility, not only on the offensive end, but defensively, what he brings. He brings a level of physicality to the game that I truly love, and he's a great passer and all those things. So I think those two would complement each other great. Now, because I want to extend the game a little bit, I'm going to put in perhaps one of my favorite players that I ever played against was Larry Bird. The legend could, he got a little post game. He's got a little 3-point game. He can pass the ball. He complements all of the things that I love about the game of basketball. I mean, I got to have the legend in there. And then plus he talks a little trash. So I got to have him in there for that. A little bit. Okay. Yeah, a little bit, At the two guard, I mean, come on, I got to go with MJ. I mean, there's, you got to have that guy who can attack the basket, play inside, outside, and do all of those things athletically that you're going to need on the perimeter. And then because he is the most difficult player that I ever had to defend, I got to have Magic Johnson as my lead guard. And I can only imagine the alley-oops and things, the interchangeable parts. So that's my starting five that I would have as far as team spacing on the floor. And I would be excited to see that because there'll be a lot of trash talking. They're big, they're athletic, and we should be able to score with the best. That should be Showtime plus, with this group.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You know what? That's the most quiet I've ever seen either of them two during this period. But BJ, take a seat back now and watch.
Okay, I'm going to take a seat. All right, here we go.
I'm going to let Mo go first. Mo, who is your addition to the small forward position for your all-time starting five?
For this one, it was quite an easy decision for me. The popular decision would be LeBron James. But obviously, I've got my point guard because of his insane passing ability, and all the other reasons I discussed in the episode a few weeks ago. So go and check that if you haven't. But the player I'm going to put small forward, LeBron James himself said this guy could dominate in any era. This guy has zero flaws in his game. This is the guy that Magic Johnson called the greatest basketball player of all time. And I have to agree with BJ here. It's the one, the only, is Mr. Larry Bird. Because Larry Bird, an unbelievable basketball talent. If you're a young fan, if you're like my age or younger, go on YouTube after this show and watch Larry Bird highlights because the man was unstoppable. Let me just give you, he had 3 championships, and those 3 championships doesn't sound like loads, but they were arguably 3 of the most difficult championships that any player has had to win, because you look at the players and the teams that he was competing with in that era, the Magic Johnson, the Kareem, the James Worthy Lakers, you had the Isaiah Thomas Pistons, you had, of course, the Chicago Bulls, and the list is endless. So, those 3 championships and 2 finals MVPs were absolutely huge. And then he had 3 back-to-back-to-back MVP awards in the regular season. He was a 12-time All-Star despite only playing 13 seasons in his career. So, he was the founding member of the 50-40-90 club as well. So the list is endless of his accomplishments. But the biggest thing for me is, you guys mentioned a little bit of trash talk. Larry Bird is the greatest trash talk of all time. We're talking about the guy who would tell the defender, I'm going to catch the ball here, I'm going to shoot it over you and win the game. Then he'd go out and do exactly that. We're talking about the guy who would come into an opponent's arena, tell the ball boy, go find a scoring record for this building. I'm going to beat it tonight. He'd beat the scoring record, then check himself out of the game. That is greatness. Larry Bird, if you don't know, then get to know.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Ovie, it's a tough act to follow. So I'm just going to give you the floor.
It's not a tough act to follow. I have LeBron James. I got LeBron James. I mean, he's won every single major award there is to win as a basketball player, and we're looking at him literally, change the game. Like what he's doing at his age now, and potentially what he'll continue to do for another couple of years, I think is just amazing. And I don't think you can realistically. Well, Larry Bird, it's a good shout. Let me take that back. But I mean, I think LeBron James matches up just fine. He can do many things, I think, a little bit better than Larry. He has a lot of physical talents that Larry just doesn't have. But obviously, he's a whole nother level of animal too. So I'll give you that. I'm not even gonna get into the back and forth. I'm not gonna get into the back and forth. But
I would say this about Larry. I would say this about Larry. Larry Bird is the only player that Michael Jordan wouldn't talk trash to. That's the only player I've ever seen that he would not talk trash to was Larry Bird. And, Larry was just a different player. He had this different look. And I have to always give, Tweety Bird, that's what we called him. I always give him the ultimate respect because he was something special. And when I say a pressure player, he played in big moments, hit pressure shots. And he was one of the great players that I've ever seen in any era, just what he brought to the game. So, but you know what? There's so many wonderful players. And, you talk about LeBron James. You can't take anything away. Certainly what he's accomplished speaks for itself. But he's one of those guys when Michael wouldn't talk trash to him. I was like, okay, who's this guy? Why can't we talk trash to him?
It's funny that you say you had the nickname Tweety Bird because a lot of people don't know that Twitter, the app, the logo, the bird in their logo is actually called Larry after Larry Bird. So that's just a little fact. That's why Twitter's my favorite app. You know what I mean? They're paying respect to the legend. But, LeBron is a strong shout. But what I will say is if you take away his athleticism off the board, what is he better than Larry Bird at? If we take both players... You're saying
taking away... All right, go on.
I'm not finished, bruv. If we look at both players, right, and we take Larry Bird at age 30 and LeBron James at age 28 or at age 29 or at age 30, Larry Bird is better than him in every statistical category. And add to that, his numbers increased when he got to the playoffs and LeBron's actually decreased. Now, I'm not saying that he's a better overall basketball player than LeBron James, but I'm just saying that's the numbers and do with them what you will.
Yeah, but what are we really talking about? You're talking about taking away an aspect of LeBron James's game that is literally a gift. It's what makes him, do you know what I'm saying, a whole nother animal. It's like saying, okay, well, if Usain Bolt was a couple inches shorter, then he wouldn't be as fast. Well, look, the reality is he is 6'5". He is a lot taller than most of the 100-meter sprinters, 200-meter sprinters. But that's what makes him special. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like taking away an aspect of Larry Bird's game and saying, oh, well, he won't be as good.
No, but I wasn't talking about taking it away.
If he could.
What my question was, aside from being a better athlete, what is LeBron better at than Larry Bird?
I mean, I wouldn't say better, but I think there's things where it can be either or, and I don't think you can say either of them are clear winners. I would say the shooting aspect. But Larry Bird is
clearly a better shooter. By miles.
Yeah, of course. And that's why I was saying that
when you talk about mentality,
I wouldn't say that.
IQ,
but when you're talking about
toughness,
Larry
Bird is clear.
You can't say that. You can't say that. This is all right. Well, you can say that and I can say what I say. Cool.
Yeah,
right?
cool. But what I'm saying is Larry Bird never had a meltdown in the finals when he was guarded by JJ Barea.
Bro, this is okay. So this is where
wow.
I stop. This is where I stop. This is where I stop.
No, you
This is
tell
where
me.
I'm done.
Oh, wow.
We can't
You're
just
saying
go off
LeBron-
How did I know
reputation. You
2011?
can't go off
No,
reputation
no,
and clout. I'm talking
no.
facts. I'm not talking
This
clout.
is your
I'm
point
talking
guard,
facts.
though, right? But this is your point guard
LeBron
of your
is my
team,
point
right?
guard because he's facilitating.
Okay.
He doesn't need to be the go-to guy. I got Larry to kill him in the fourth.
This is the same
I got
guy
Larry
you
to kill
picked,
it. LeBron
but-
can take a back seat.
So you have
Whereas
a
you got
meltdown at your
LeBron
point guard
and you got
position.
Magic. They're both
You've
just
got
going
a
to be passing
meltdown.
to each other. No, you take the ball. No,
What are
you
you
take the
talking
ball.
about? Don't worry
That's you.
about my big man. Hey, we've got MJ and KD. I think there's more than enough shots will go up between those two. Don't worry about that.
What is the list of players here? What's the
picked-
five?
I went with Magic Johnson at the point guard, MJ at the 2, LeBron at the 3, and the 4's KD.
Who's the five?
We do that
Oh,
next
Yeah,
week.
we haven't done that one yet. We haven't done that one yet.
You haven't done
But
that.
yeah,
Okay.
don't worry. I have a monster on the inside too. So between the two people who can play collectively with everyone, I mean, Mo's got a lot of guys who take a lot of shots. To be quite frank, between Michael Jordan, Larry, and KG, good luck with that one. Anyway, I don't see how there's going to be enough shots to go around over there. But hey.
I don't know if you watch the same games as I do, but if you watch Kevin Garnett, as soon as he got some good teammates in 2007 and onwards, his scoring went from the high 20s all the way down to the teens because he realized his role in that squad. So if you're going to make blanket assumptions based on whatever misinformed facts that you have, that's cool. And that's on you. But if you actually watch the games, you'll understand what I'm saying.
But last week you were just talking about him at the Timberwolves, right? You're just talking about KG at the Timberwolves, right? That's the KG that you were using to.
I'm saying he's got that in his bag. He won't even need to use them skills on my team.
Okay.
That's the greatness of my team.
Okay.
Gentlemen, well, speaking of small forwards, I think this is the perfect time to wish Vince Carter a happy retirement. He announced his retirement last week after 22 years in the game. I think, Mo, this is your chance to lift up that jersey so that the younger fans can understand and appreciate what was Vincenti retiring at the tender age of 43 and the first player to appear in 4 different decades in the league. Vince, you will be forever remembered, my friend. Congratulations to you. And also, it's time to tell you about what happens this week in our primetime preview. Remember, we haven't got BJ on here for no reason. You need to relive the greatness. That's Sunday, the 5th of July, 8:30 on Sky Sports Arena. Relive Michael Jordan's sign-off moments with the Chicago Bull as we relive Game 6. And we can relive the greatness that was Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And we are back Tuesday on the Sky Sports YouTube channel and of course repeated on Wednesday, the Sky Sports Arena from 8 p.m. to make sure you're up to date with all of the latest news on the Heatcheck. Gentlemen, this has been a pleasure. I enjoyed that. I really did. BJ, more than anything else, thank you so much for gracing us with your incredible presence, my friend. Hopefully we can have you on here again.
Thank you. I got to get into this argument. I like this argument. I want to continue. This argument. I can't wait to hear the center's position now. You know, I can't wait. So I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. I want more. I want more of this.
He's probably going to go with Steph Curry. I don't know. He'll probably mix it up and go with Steph Curry.
It doesn't matter who I go with. My team will still win.
Nothing's off the table with him. Don't worry.
Well, I mean, your criteria for a good big is having better guard skills, so that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
And until next week when we decide who the center position is, stay safe, remain positive, and remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So go and be great this week. Salute.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.